Hello everybody, the Nameless Narcissist here once again. Simple man diagnosed with NPD, giving you the facts on narcissistic personality disorder, the things that go on in my head. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe, but keep in mind, I'm no clinician. I can only speak to my own experiences and the studies that I read. So, I have an interesting video for you today. Basically, I have a friend who I have been friends with them since middle school, and we've had a, relatively speaking, long-lasting relationship. And for the most part, this was somebody who has always kind of been able to get through to me, whether I'm in like a mood or they need to bring up something that I'm kind of doing wrong, so to speak. So I kind of wanted to share what they had to say, but keep in mind, I'm not sure how well this would work in any of your guys' situations, because this was a pretty specific set of situations. It was somebody that I respected, who I had a good rapport with, who I've known for a really, really long time. And I've always been a pretty self-aware guy, pretty self-reflective, so I may have been more open to some of this stuff than a normal narcissist would. But regardless, I think it might be helpful to share some of this stuff. So the first thing is how to bring up issues with a narcissist, or try to get them down from a heated situation. And the advice that they had primarily was, one, patience, because you're not going to be able to get through to them like immediately, right? Because there's going to be a lot of resistance there. And then once you've committed to it, don't back off, and also don't attack. Because if you back off, apparently in my situation, what would always happen is that I'd feel misunderstood, especially when I'm like going through it. I'd feel misunderstood, like I could never relate to people. It would enforce these innate feelings of badness, and if my grandiose defenses are still up, it would just kind of result in anger. And also, if you push it, you're basically being too ambitious, and I'm going to shut down more and more. You're just going to kind of shut off the possibility of me fixing these things. I would also advise, like, because they also mentioned you kind of got to feel out the situation. How much am I going to be even willing to entertain? Because if you hold your ground, eventually we'll have to think about it a little bit. But I also wouldn't get aggressive with this person because of the rapport that we had. They kind of compared it to a wounded animal. It's like, okay, this is somebody that you gotta help, but at the same time, like, it might bite you if you're not careful, more or less. They also said that, like, it's important not to burn yourself out. That, like, you're not always going to be able to get through to me, or always going to be able to calm myself down on something, and you're not going to help any situation if you're like tired and shit and trying to fix somebody else. Don't get absorbed into my bullshit, basically. Don't let yourself be engulfed. And also, don't like, they mentioned to very much not walk on eggshells. Try to be blunt and stuff like that, because one, I'd respect that, and two, when you're walking on eggshells around me, I'm going to notice it. Most narcissists have this thing where, like, they can basically look at somebody and immediately tell what that person is not thinking about them, but the attitude that they have towards them, like how much they're being liked, being received. You walk on eggshells around me, I'm gonna get pissed off. It's like, what'd I do? Like, why are you patronizing me? Why are you treating me like I'm somebody to be feared? And that also enforces the idea of being bad. And you also have to address the black and white thinking a lot, right? Because that happens. And you gotta remind them that, like, nobody's inherently good, nobody's inherently bad. There's a spectrum of gray, whatever. Then I brought up how to bring up with somebody that they might have NPD. I made an analogy to this because most of my life they were insisting that I was, like, depressed, which, yeah, that too. And how they addressed that situation. And they also noticed that, like, because of how I would react to it, they kind of assumed that I was looking for that validation, right? That like, I am suffering, but I was too proud to admit that I was. And so somebody basically forced it out of me, right? Some of your narcissists might actually be suffering, but and maybe they even want somebody to, like, rip it out of them, but they're too proud to admit any of that. But that was a pretty specific situation. And maybe that could work for NPD too in certain situations. And it's also important to know the person, right? That's kind of the crux of most of this. You need to have such a good rapport with them, which is why I was kind of worried about this video, is because, like, the specific situations that kind of manifest. Then I asked, what was the first like tell? How do you spot a narcissist? Why would I, be like that? And they said the first thing that they noticed is that when we were like private, I'd be kind of realistic about some of my issues and things going on in my life. But as soon as I was around a group, I'd be really performative about my issues and just some of the things going on in my life, right? It wouldn't, not that it wasn't real, but it would be just this whole, it'd be a whole show that I was making revolving these things, which I do think that's a really big indication of narcissism, right? They can be like pretty, not relaxed, but like, if you're close to them, they'll be more, I guess, genuine. But as soon as there's like a group or an audience, they're going to go off. So I brought up why we had the report that we did, right? Or would do. And like I was like, I'm not sure if I would ever really have connected somebody or viewed somebody on my level if it weren't for you. And then they replied that it always came off that I did have that urge to connect, even when my grandiose defenses were really intact. I remember describing loneliness. I'm not sure if I did to them, but in general. So they think that I would have found somebody to have that rapport with. So I'm not sure, honestly, but your narcissist might have somebody that in their lives that this stuff can actually apply to. What's interesting is because this was in middle school and high school, and I was able to view them on an even level because we were part of separate friend groups, and we were basically equally as liked and respected in both our friend groups, but I was able to view the hierarchies as separate, right? So it wasn't as much of a competition. I was able to respect somebody that I viewed almost, not identically, but like on a similar level to me, because again, not competition. It's like two kings meeting, right? Two like rulers of nations. It's like they are in some degree on even levels, or at least closer than it would be if like one of them was a subject, so to speak. And also that I respect the fact that they never feared me, that they were never intimidated by me. It's interesting that my opinions of people were really colored by by their ability to stand up to me a lot of the times. And I asked what the most problematic things that I had were. And this one's kind of interesting. That I would kind of embrace the worst aspects of myself and make it into something that I am proud of and to stick out, right? I would take like my whole infidelity thing where I would sleep with people, those girlfriends who were already in relationships. It would become like part of this persona that I thought was, well, one, secretly I thought was very respectable. Not respectable, but people would be envious of and admire. But also I would take those parts that secretly I felt very ashamed of and proved my worthlessness, how inherently bad I was. And I'd make them part of a persona that I would pretend, well, I was genuinely like proud of it, so to speak, but it was a defense mechanism, right? And that made it very hard a lot of the times for them to kind of address some of these negative things. It's because I made it into a character. I asked them if they actually thought I was good at reading people. And I guess the short thing is kind of what I've said before. Yes, I can read people pretty well, and especially their attitudes towards me, but I often misconstrue why they're having those emotions or why they're feeling that way towards me, or assume that because I'm so self-absorbed, I assume that their emotions are about me. Another piece of advice that they had is that like if I'm in a mood or a very depressive state and stuff like that, or I'm like a mess, that it's like never forever, right? There again, the degree of patience that's required for dealing with a narcissistic person is very important. And honestly, they were never, not until recently, they were never quite sure if I was on a general trajectory up, because I would have all these ups and downs. And not until recently did they really not pick up on the fact, but were certain in the fact that I wasn't always going to be like the way that I am, especially when I'm in moods, because that's what affected them the most, is when my emotional dysregulation, because I wasn't able to be domineering towards them because of the rapport that we had. And I asked, if you could change one thing about me, what would it be that you think would improve me the most? And they basically were like, I think most of the things that stuck out have been fixed, but the remaining ones that are problematic are so inherently intertwined that there's no real way to just address one of them and pick it off. And I think that's important. I only bring that one up because I think that's important to realize, is that like this is a personality disorder. It's a bunch of defense mechanisms that are interlocked, right? There's a few of them on the peripherals you're going to be able to get rid of, but the core personality isn't going to change substantially. I asked, I don't remember what my question was exactly, but I was basically like, when did you realize that like I had NPD? And they were basically like, I just never really thought about it, right? Because the fact that I was a narcissist wasn't as important as the behaviors I was expressing, which I think is a really healthy way to go about that, right? View them as a person, not through the lens of their disorder. Maybe their action, and sure, it can be helpful to understand how pathology is affecting some of their behaviors, but not all the behaviors are going to be unique to the narcissism. Some of it may just be themselves. Not to mention that the presentations that their narcissism may have may be significantly different than anything you'll find on the internet, or hell, anything I can tell you. And they thought that and they also believed that not treating me outside of diagnosis would lead to a lot of overanalyzing my behaviors. Again, and I've had issues with this with my friends, that everything I do will be framed through the lens of my narcissism. And that's just not helpful in terms of building that rapport and being able to address serious issues. And I asked basically at the end, if they had any closing thoughts, right? Anything that they want to share. And basically, when I'm in, and again, they're mainly focused on my emotional dysregulation, my anger. And they basically said, it's important not to ignore the things that I say, but don't act like those statements didn't happen, right? But wait, it's important not to take the things I say too seriously or personally, because, I'll be an emotional wreck and attack. But don't forget those statements, keep them in mind, because those are still important, and it's important to take them seriously. No, wait, yeah. Most important to not ignore the things I say. Yeah, not ignore. Don't ignore the things that I say, but take them seriously to some degree. And don't act like they're forever or that they have to impact the relationship going forward, right? Because to me, those things aren't permanent. And for me, it just feels like hanging on to the past a lot of the times. And though I wouldn't say that I don't mean some of the things that I say, the things that are an attack or the things that I am being severely emotionally distressed about, I'm trying to think of a good way to put it. It's more to keep those in mind because there's an underlying issue there probably, but it said more about me than it says more about me than it does about whoever I'm saying those things to. And they said it was also important to look at the past together, especially since I need self-definition to figure out why I did things, to be able to talk about things that happened in the past. And sometimes that's the most helpful thing that you can do in order to address some issues. Because in the moment, my defenses are probably way more intact than it would be if I'm reflecting on something that happened a long time ago. The shame the shame is still pretty bad, but it's not quite as bad, and I'm a little bit more receptive to change. But yeah, that's most of that. I thought that was pretty interesting. They're a really smart person. I wish that they were more willing to be on camera and stuff, but it's what it is. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and take your fucking meds, please.